Richard, welcome back to Butser Ancient Farm.
Always a pleasure to come back here.
And we are, of course, in our beloved Dunchill house.
I know. It's we spent a lot of time doing this, and it's lovely to see it still standing so well.
5 years later, almost.
Yeah, 5 years. Wow.
Yeah,
Wow. No, it looks great, doesn't it?
5 years in October. And of course, this original excavation took place in Salisbury Plain.
Yep, on the edge of the driver training area of the military training estate. One of the only sites we know of with late Bronze Age houses, and the project came up that we would build a roundhouse based on that floor template, and I think it looks fabulous. So yeah, all part of the Bronze Age.
And quite close to that is the reason that we're here today is that we have just burnt a very, very large wickerman, which was inspired by the Amesbury Archer, which of course was excavated around
really close. So it's it must be about, I don't know, 15 minutes away from where this house was in the late Bronze Age. That Amesbury's right on the edge, the southeast edge of what I call the training area of Salisbury Plain, but really close and not far from Stonehenge as well. So yeah, the Amesbury Archer is one of the most celebrated finds in British archaeology of the last 30-40 years.
And indeed, I have heard him referred to as the king of Stonehenge. What do you feel about that?
So yeah, I mean, it's always nice to have a kind of a strap line linking somebody with a particular place, isn't it? And there's nowhere really as famous maybe in archaeology terms in Britain as Stonehenge. Was he the king of Stonehenge? No. Is there such a thing as a king of Stonehenge? Probably not. But he would have been really familiar with it, and I think Stonehenge would have been important to this person, and that's may well be why they were where they were and when they died. So I think Stonehenge is key to his story perhaps, but was he connected with the building of it or the maintenance of it or the worship there? No.
Impossible to say, isn't it?
Very difficult to say, yeah.
But we are dealing with around 2300 BCE.
About 2300 BCE. And of course, at that time, Stonehenge is still a focal point. You've got the monument's been in existence for quite a while by that point. The main kind of Sarsons are probably about 2400, I think, the movement there. But in about 2300, the time of his death, there's a rearrangement. The blue stones are rearranged, and there are burials from this time period in the monument and around it as well. So this person's life would have been, well, he would have known exactly, and it is a he, would have known exactly what was going on at Stonehenge. And that's something you and I never probably will.
No, unfortunately. And so we're looking at, he is kind of excavated on Boscombe Down.
Yep.
And that's around 3 miles from Stonehenge?
Yep, it's no distance at all. It's a slightly high ground, the village of Amesbury itself, and then it dips down towards the River Avon, which then meanders very close to Stonehenge, which again is on some slightly raised ground. But only, very, very short distance, walking distance for this person, for sure.
So I think there's a really interesting story around his find and his excavation. Yeah,
well, he was excavated by Wessex Archaeology as part of a development project, and a lot of sites, when you find something of real importance, obviously there's the thrill and the excitement. You know it's going to be really, really good. There's also a fear that if you leave it overnight, and I think he was found on a bank holiday weekend, that there's the chance of it being pilfered. And that can be archaeology of any time period. When I've done First World War sites, you're nervous about leaving human remains on site because they have things with them that might help identify the person. And that's the same with the sort of the Amesbury Archer and the early Bronze Age elements, because it may not give you a person's name, but it will give you the story of them. And if these things are gone, and they'll have much more of a financial value, if it's gold and things like that, it's a real nervousness. So the team actually worked round the clock on this bank holiday weekend to make sure that it was done as quickly as possible. And the final thing was excavating by car headlamp. He would love the kind of the film lights that we're working with, but they had to have the headlights of the car switched on to illuminate the excavation to do it properly. So it's dedication that really did pay off. And I think if you're one of the archaeologists, you really wouldn't have complained doing that, because that must have been the dig of a lifetime.
And the reason I think that everybody is very in love with this piece of archaeology and the stories that it tells is because it's a really rich burial, isn't it?
It's phenomenal. You could dig, it's sort of what we call a beaker burial. And this is sort of right at the start of the earliest part of the Bronze Age, in that period, about 2300. And when you dig a beaker burial, and I'm sure you've done the same, but you've excavated a few of these things, usually if you're lucky, you'll get one eponymous vessel, a beaker, and you do sometimes get grave goods with it. But this person had a ridiculous amount of material with them, placed all around the grave, and it's all of really high quality. This isn't just, we'll just put all the rubbish in with the one burial. This is stuff of incredible importance and early and beautiful. This individual was of some importance, for sure.
I think one of my big interests is metallurgy, and I'm always fascinated by the fact that we're calling this early Bronze Age, but in fact there is no bronze in this burial. We're seeing copper. So he has an array of copper daggers or knives, as well as some really interesting gold pieces.
So the gold pieces are really intriguing, aren't they? And for years they were interpreted, they were known as gold basket earrings, because they tended to be found, didn't they, up in the kind of skull region of the burial. And people think, oh, they're around here, so they're rings. But, you know, practically, how do they work? How do they clip on ears? And I think I'm right in saying that the interpretation is they're now for hair braids. Yeah. And that would still work for where they are, but that's the real magic, I think, of the Bronze Age. I think it's a period of alchemy. You can say that with the copper and the bronze, because you're turning stone into this wonderful reflective metal. But of course, you do have gold, and I think I'm right in saying this is the earliest gold that we've got.
Yeah,
in Britain.
so far as I know, that's correct.
And that's intriguing, because the edges of the plain, you're beginning to find some pretty famous bits of gold working in this period. There's a burial which has been known as the Upton Lovell Shaman, which is on the kind of west side of Salisbury Plain, with an individual which had boar's tusks, and also what used to be interpreted as a tattooing kit, but some polished stones which have traces of gold working on. So there's this importance of gold in the earliest Bronze Age, or the Copper Age, or whatever you want to call it, at this time period. And then not too far from Amesbury, you've got probably the most famous early Bronze Age burial, prior to the Voskham Bowman and the Amesbury Archer being found, was the Bushbarrow Chieftain, which has this phenomenal lozenge, this diamond-shaped piece of very flat gold, probably made from about kind of a marble size worth of gold that's been flattened out and placed in the burial. So these very, very rich burials being excavated by antiquaries and very early archaeologists. Incredible that the Amesbury Archer actually escaped that sort of early archaeology in many ways. So to get a burial like this excavated in modern archaeological techniques by a really good company, great archaeologists, has given us a wealth of opportunities to find more about this time period, I think.
And I love the fact that one interpretation, and I say one interpretation, is that he was indeed a metal worker. And apart from the gold and the copper, he's also found with a little cushion stone, which showed traces of gold, so potentially gold working, which is quite interesting. But of course, he's called the Amesbury Archer. Why do we call him the Amesbury Archer?
I know we always like to do this. I know there's a burial on the Salisbury Plain not too far from him, at a place called Snail Down, and that's an early Bronze Age barrow cemetery. And there's the Hunter's Barrow, this thing, and it's called a Hunter's Barrow because it had a dog skeleton in with a man, and the man had some barbed and tanged arrowheads. So he's obviously a hunter because he's got a dog and he's got arrows. So we like to make these kind of little stories about the Amesbury Archer. The reason he's called that is because he does have elements of the panoply of archery. I think it's 16 barbed and tanged arrowheads, isn't it? He had something like that. Yeah. So the flint arrowheads, and these are beautiful things. And I did a course here at Butser some years ago where it was a flint knapping course, and I had these visions of coming away, taking home these barbed and tanged arrowheads that I'd made here, and and it's not easy. And it looked like, frankly, a monkey had done it when I'd done these stones together. Rubbish. It looked awful.
I did one once, and it looked like it could go around corners because it literally was
so
just like
so it's a real skill, isn't it, to being able to make these things and pressure flaking, and so someone must have to know it. And the ones that he's got, 16 of these things, they're gorgeous, and they are really, really incredible. But not only did he have the arrowheads, he had what we've interpreted traditionally as being an archer's wrist guard. And you think about firing a bow, the string of the bow, when you release it, will slap into your forearm, and if you do that enough, it'll flay you, and it's going to be very stingy. So you find in burials of this time period, and it's usually towards the forearm of the burial, you do find these pieces of stone that have been drilled through, perhaps for putting onto a leather wrist guard, and that will stop the string. And he had two, I think, sandstone examples. Actually, can I show you one I brought from Salisbury Plain? It's a bit like one I found earlier. Now, this was found on an Operation Nightingale excavation of an early Bronze Age burial. This was found at a place called Netheravon, and this was in a collard urn of a cremation. So it's a slightly bit later. It's into the Bronze Age at this point, but it's exactly the sort of thing that was with the Amesbury Archer. Please do. It's very stable. It's made of an igneous rock called amphibolite. So it's smooth, it's cool, it's beautiful. But the skill to get stone that thin, that smooth, curved, it's been repaired in the past.
It actually feels incredible, doesn't it?
It's astonishing, isn't it?
Smaller than I thought it would be. So this would be situated kind of here on your wrist, right?
Exactly that. So it's going to be, and you see the little holes there, that's where it would have been stitched onto a leather bracer or something like that onto your arm, and that will, hold it. Now, there is some debate as to whether these are practical or ceremonial, and these are just to indicate your status, perhaps as someone who was an archer or knew about archery skills and practices, and whether that's practical or not. That's something I don't know whether we can tell from the Amesbury Archers braces, but this is the sort of thing that's turning up in that kind of part of prehistory. And the skill to make the barbed and tanged arrowheads out of flint, to make wrist guards such as this, these are people with incredible abilities. And then you've got the gold working. These are people with an aesthetic, and sitting in this house. Or something we always said at the time is that these people that appreciated art, they appreciated colour and design. Yes. So we've got colour in the Bronze Age because they had these sorts of ideas, and there's no reason that they were living in a sepia-toned world. I think they appreciated art, they appreciated styles and colours just as we do today, and I think the graves shows that to an extent as well.
Absolutely, and I think we always have to remember that we're just seeing the inorganic remains, so we're missing all of the organics.
Yes.
Which little do we know.
So he had, what was it, 5 beakers? Yeah. What was in those beakers? What was in those vessels that he was given to the afterlife? Was there a kind of any traces of what the contents were? But did he have baskets? Did he have leather clothing on?
Yes.
Something we just don't know in the chalk on Salisbury Plain, that it's just not going to preserve that sort of material. So we're looking at the inorganic remains, and that is so rich that the potential that he had all these other things, really huge.
Is incredible, isn't it? And one of the things that I suppose, so the story in itself, the excavation in itself is remarkable and really impressive. But what I also love is the science that then looks into those remains and the stories that tells us. Yeah. And some of those stories are also quite remarkable, aren't they?
So they're incredible. And it's one of the reasons why we keep and curate respectfully human remains, because the science and technology that has unfolded in the last, probably about since the time of the Boscombe Bowman, all the kind of, and the Amesbury Archer, about how these things, we're able to study them more and tell a lot more about these people, because they're people, they're not artifacts, they're not assemblages, it's a story about people. And we're able to tell a lot more about them because the scientific techniques have improved. We can tell how old they were when they died, we can tell how tall they were, certain things about the malady, and there's all these other things we can tell now through things like DNA, ancient DNA and isotope assessments. We can find out much more about their story, and it's important that we're able to do that through the curation of their remains as science improves. So I think, one of the things I think maybe you're alluding to is, where do
teasing it out.
I know, where do they come from? And I think that's a critical thing, isn't it? Because you can look at the enamel of your teeth with isotopes, and that will tell you about the geology of the water you drink as a kid. And they give you a certain mapping about this thing. And the assessment of this has told us the Amesbury Archer isn't a Wiltshireman. He's not from those parts. He's come from a big old distance. So he's come from Central Europe, we think, isn't it?
Yeah.
So was it that sort of Germany, Swiss, that sort of border? That's a huge distance. And how are you going to get there? Well, it's, I suppose, rivers. Maybe they're going using horses, but it's a long way, and then to end up at Stonehenge, that's got to be deliberate, hasn't it? But you're
definitely going to be in a boat at some point.
You have to,
doing
to get to Britain. It is cut off at this point. There's no way.
Yeah.
So he's experienced riverine travel. The other thing about him, and again this comes back to the science, is that so what's he doing here? Well, he's got to move a big distance. He's not going to be running it. He's not going to be walking it particularly, because he has got a really, really bad leg. He's lost his patella at some point. So his patella's been really badly damaged. So if you lose your kneecap, the patella, then your leg is much less flexible. So he's basically walking with one leg and flicking the other leg round. So he's much more immobile. So moving a big distance from, let's say, the Alps. Let's say that this happened when he was living in the Alps. It might happen slightly later, but if it happens when he's living in the Alps and he's moved this big distance, now he's got to make use of so many transport types because he's not able to move huge amounts by himself. Now, why is he at Stonehenge? Is that because it's a place of healing? Don't know. There's all this debate about Stonehenge, isn't it? Place of death, place of healing, and I don't think we'll ever know. There's some big schools of thought. But
I always like to think of him, and I do picture this scene of this exotic, and I'm going to use the word exotic, whether it's correct or not, but this person who has these accoutrements, these copper daggers, which may never have been seen here before. He's got the flints, he's got the gold, he's wearing gold, but he's got this limp of sorts, and he's encountering local people in Salisbury Plain during the time, it must have been quite mind-blowing, and he is likely, I think, to have brought with him some metalworking skills, knowledge, etc. So it must have been quite phenomenal to meet him.
I think it's, I use the phrase shock and awe, isn't it? So somebody who's turning up with something utterly new, it can be mind-blowing. Imagine seeing the first kind of iPhone or something like that, and seeing all the things that this can do, and you want one.
I imagine that there is a certain amount of kind of magic associated with people like this who are transforming materials. And I don't know, have you ever smelted copper, for example?
So I've only done it once, and that was here. During the build of this, we actually made a lot of the tools for making this house, and I remember constantly having to resharpen the axes, and it took forever. But that transformative process, we've got like a greenish coloured stone.
Yes.
Is it malachite?
It is
I think
indeed,
we're using.
malachite, yeah.
And so we were putting it in this furnace. And then at the end of it all, you've got this gleaming golden thing. And imagine being the first person to see that. It is astonishing, and it is alchemy. It is first when you're making this discovery, and there are lots of debates in archaeology as to whether metallurgists were viewed as other. They were viewed as different, and they were imbued with magic, because you're making rock into something transformative and very, very different.
And even the process, I think, through really intense fire, and during that process, if you remember, you'll have seen green flames and purple flames. Yeah. And all sorts of wonderful things. So it is certainly a bit of magic. I still think it's quite magical.
No, I'm completely with you. I think every archaeology student should be made to do this sort of process, because it just shows you the skills involved, but the whole spirit of the transformation, I think, is a really, really important thing. And then on top of that, so you've got this material, which is, it's a funny amorphous lump, but then to make it into something like the hair trusses, the gold hair trusses, that's incredible, isn't it? To make really, really thin, beautifully designed, very delicate, decorative, but functional in the way it works with the hair potentially. That is a phenomenal skill set. So this person had a lot of abilities that would have perhaps set him apart from others in the Bronze Age.
But it really also, I think, opens your mind when you're thinking about the Bronze Age in general, and about people moving and things moving and networks. Yeah. And I always think of the Bronze Age as just like a network. People are on the go. They're appreciating beautiful things. They're creating beautiful things. They're interacting. And I think it's also quite interesting to think about his relationship to the Boscombe bowman, who is slightly different.
Slightly different, similar but different. It's the same sort of time period, and slightly less rich burial, but he's part of that pattern of people coming in with these new ideas, new cultures and styles. And of course, when we talk about the Amesbury Archer, he's one of two. So there are two individuals that are found here. The second individual at Amesbury is not so well known, perhaps, doesn't have all the incredible grave goods, but the remarkable thing with the second person is he's related to the Amesbury Archer. Not father and son, or this is a much younger individual, but could he be grandson and grandfather? We don't know. And the only reason we know the real link, to start with, is that there's a real strange osteological element with the heel of both individuals that shows a genetic link between them.
And that's quite rare, I think.
Very, very rare. So we can, I think, fairly firmly say that these two are related in some way. And have they both come over together as a familial group? Was this person these questions that you can ask about working out what was the relationship between the two of them, and why did they all come to Stonehenge?
And may they have lived in dwellings like this, or maybe they have encountered
you've got your Horton house, so you've got a Neolithic house, and this is a late Bronze Age house, so it's always something in between. I think by the sort of the earlier part of the Bronze Age, we are starting to get into these circular constructions. I hope you would appreciate this house.
I think you would. Richard, thank you so much for coming and chatting to me about one of my favourite bits of British archaeology.
It's a great pleasure. It's always good to come back and visit Butser, and especially the Bronze Age house.
Well, I'll come back anytime.
Thank you.